You're home alone. It's quiet, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. But then, you hear something. A knock, a voice, a sound you can't explain. You tell yourself it's nothing, until it happens again. What if the one night you felt safest, the one night you were alone, turned into your worst nightmare? In tonight's episode, we're diving into real-life stories of people who found themselves alone, only to realize they weren't the only ones in the house. Keep listening to find out what happens next. You might just start checking the locks a little more carefully tonight. But before we start, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you'll never miss a spine-tingling episode. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, comment, and share the video. And if you want even more, stay connected with us on our social media platforms for more creepy content. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. And now let's dive into the darkness together. I was 14 years old when it happened, living in a small, sleepy town where everyone knew each other's name. As an only child, I spent a lot of time alone at home. My parents were hardworking people who did their best to provide for us, but money was always tight. Both of them worked long hours, and more often than not, they'd pick up overtime shifts or take on extra jobs just to make ends meet. This meant I was frequently left by myself after school until late at night, waiting for them to come home. I got used to the silence and the routine. That evening, my parents were both working closing shifts at their respective jobs. I'd just finished my homework and eaten a quick snack when I decided to go for a walk. It was a habit I'd formed over the years, walking in the woods behind our house to clear my mind and pass the time. The trail was quiet, usually empty except for the occasional squirrel or bird, and I liked the solitude. The woods had a calming effect on me. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the back door. The sun was still shining, casting a golden hue over the landscape, and I felt a sense of peace as I walked along the 2.5-mile trail. It was a familiar route, one I'd walked countless times, and I felt safe there. The only sounds I could hear were my footsteps crunching on the leaves and the occasional rustling of wind through the trees. But after about a mile, something felt off. I didn't know what it was at first, but I noticed a figure up ahead. A man, sitting with his back against a tree. He had a dark blue jacket on, and a red baseball cap pulled low over his face. His posture seemed odd, slumped and hunched, as if he was either sleeping or just resting. I didn't think much of it at first. There were occasional hikers or hunters who passed through, and it wasn't strange to see someone on the trail. Still, something in the back of my mind made me uneasy. I slowed my pace, trying to be discreet as I passed him. I didn't want to disturb anyone who might just be out for a quiet break. As I got closer, I tried to stay as far to the side of the trail as I could, but I was still close enough to make out the details of him. His jacket was a little weathered, and there was a strange, faint smell of something that I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just the damp earth from the woods, but I found myself holding my breath as I walked past. Just as I was nearly past him, I heard movement. He lifted his head slowly, and our eyes locked. The man's eyes were wide, tired-looking, and bloodshot. He didn't smile or even acknowledge me in a friendly way. Instead, there was something unsettling about the way he frowned, almost as if he was angry, or worse, disappointed. My stomach churned with a feeling I couldn't shake. I picked up the pace immediately. I wasn't sure why, but my body was on high alert. I couldn't look back, but I could hear him shifting behind me. I started walking faster, then jogging, heart pounding in my chest. I reached the end of the trail, a little winded but thankful that I hadn't seen him move. I didn't dare stop to look behind me to see if he was following. When I got home, I rushed inside and locked the door behind me. It was a habit I'd developed living alone so often, but that night it felt more urgent. I double-checked every lock, even though I knew there was no real threat. Still, the unease lingered. I told myself I was just being paranoid. It was probably nothing. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about the man on the trail, his eyes, his strange, unfriendly expression. I was still shaken up, but I figured it was just nerves. After all, I was used to being home alone, and I knew how to take care of myself. But then, only a few minutes after I turned the TV on, I heard something. It was faint at first, but as I listened, I realized it was a voice. Someone calling out from the back door. My heart skipped a beat. I got up quietly and tiptoed down the hallway, straining to hear. It wasn't the usual sounds of the house settling. It was a voice, calling again and again. "Hello? Hello?" I froze in place. My breath caught in my throat, and my mind raced. It sounded like the man from the trail. I crept to the living room window, pulling aside the curtain just enough to peek through. My worst fear was confirmed. There he was, standing at the back door, his face pressed up against the glass. His red cap was tilted down so I couldn't see his eyes, but I could tell he was looking inside. I felt my blood run cold. I pulled back from the window, heart hammering in my chest. The man hadn't seen me, but I didn't want to take any chances. I crouched down, trying to stay out of view, and my mind raced. What was he doing here? Why was he outside my house? I waited, my entire body tense. The silence was deafening, and then I heard it, the door handle jiggling. He was trying to open the door. My stomach dropped, and I instinctively reached for the phone on the table. But as I picked it up, I heard the man's voice again, this time more insistent. "Hello? Is anyone in there?" I held my breath, listening to him tug at the door handle, the metal creaking under the pressure. The lock rattled, the door shaking with each violent attempt. I felt completely helpless. My mind raced through every possible scenario. What did he want? Why was he here? What was he planning? I didn't know how much time passed, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, after what seemed like the longest few minutes of my life, the man stopped. There was a long pause. I didn't dare move or make a sound. Then, I heard footsteps receding. He was leaving. My heart was still pounding, but I allowed myself to breathe again, slowly. I didn't wait around. I immediately called my parents, my voice shaky as I explained what had just happened. They were worried but tried to calm me down, telling me to lock every door and window and stay put. They called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of the man. He had disappeared. The police told me to be cautious and to report anything unusual in the future. They checked the area around the house but couldn't find any trace of him. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that night. Why had he been in the woods? Why had he come to my house? And most chilling of all, what had he been trying to do? For the next few days, I was on edge, constantly checking the locks and windows, making sure everything was secure. My parents were more protective than usual, but I could tell they didn't fully understand the fear I felt. Even now, years later, I still think about that night. I never saw that man again, but the memory of his eyes, their tired, angry stare, haunts me. What if I hadn't locked the door in time? What if he'd come inside? I'll never know for sure, but I'm thankful he didn't. And to this day, I avoid that trail, even though I sometimes wonder if I'll ever encounter him again. I can't help but feel that something about that night wasn't just a random encounter. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I always felt like I was being watched. This is the story of the night I came closer to death than I ever could have imagined, when I was just a kid, home alone, and completely unaware of the danger lurking just beyond my bedroom door. I was 10 years old, the middle child in a family of 5. My older brother, at 14, was out that Friday night causing mischief with his friends, and my little sister, just 5 years old, was tucked safely in bed. The house was quiet, or at least it was supposed to be. It all started when I was sitting in my room, playing a Star Wars video game on my PlayStation, trying to distract myself. The evening was normal until I heard my mom's voice, a sound I'd never forget. She was on the phone, crying, talking to someone at the hospital. I didn't know what was going on, but I could tell it wasn't good. My stomach dropped as I ran to see what was wrong. I found my mom standing by the kitchen phone, visibly shaken, as she spoke to the hospital. My brother had been hit by a car. I remember hearing bits and pieces, but the details blurred in my mind. I couldn't process it. All I knew was that my parents needed to go immediately, and they were in a panic. My dad rushed to calm my mom down, but I could see the worry on his face too. They told me they needed to take my sister with them to the hospital, but asked if I was okay staying home alone. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I said yes. I wasn't about to go to the hospital and see my brother in pain. Besides, I figured everything would be fine. My parents left, and I was alone in the house. For the next few hours, I tried to distract myself by playing more games, not thinking much about the situation. The clock ticked past midnight, and I knew I should probably be in bed, but I stayed up anyway, still a little shaken by the phone call. I turned off the game console, crawled into bed with my Game Boy, and tried to settle into sleep. That's when I heard the door. The front door, our front door, creaked open. I wasn't sure at first. I lay still, listening, waiting. But then, I heard it again. Footsteps. The door had opened, and I was too afraid to move. I listened carefully. I heard no voices, nothing to suggest it was my parents returning. Just silence, followed by more footsteps, muffled and soft. Something was wrong. I quietly got out of bed, my heart racing. I slowly opened my bedroom door and peered out into the dark hallway. The living room lights were off, but I could see 3 shadowy figures standing there. I froze. For what felt like an eternity, I couldn't move. My breath caught in my throat, and my body locked up with fear. I wasn't sure who they were, but I knew they weren't my family. They weren't supposed to be here. I slowly backed into my room, trying to make as little noise as possible. I closed my door, but it wasn't quiet enough. I knew they must have heard the soft click as the door shut. Panic surged through me. I had to hide. I rushed to my closet, opened the door as quietly as I could, and crawled in behind the piles of clothes and boxes, hoping to disappear. I huddled there in complete darkness, holding my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. I waited and waited. Every creak of the floorboards, every shuffle of movement sent my heart into overdrive. It was agonizing, feeling like I was trapped in that closet forever, knowing the men in my living room could be moving closer. Then, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps, moving towards my room. The door creaked open. I sat still, hoping and praying they wouldn't see me. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, so loud it almost drowned out the sound of the door opening. For what felt like hours, the silence stretched on. And then, the footsteps came closer. They were at the edge of the closet. I could hear them breathing, but I didn't dare look up. The door lingered open for what felt like eternity, but I stayed frozen in place, praying that I hadn't been spotted. Finally, the door clicked shut. Footsteps receded down the hall. The house fell silent again. I didn't move. Not for a long time. When my parents finally returned, I rushed downstairs to find the front door left wide open. The house had been ransacked. They had stolen several valuables, but worse. There was no sign of anyone. No one was caught. The police came, but there was nothing to trace. The thing that still haunts me to this day is the fact that I don't know what would have happened if they had found me. Would they have taken me? Would they have hurt me? Did they even see me hiding in that closet? I'll never know. What I do know is that I was lucky. Lucky to have escaped that night. That was the night I came closest to not making it out alive. And every time I think about that closet door, I wonder, what if they had opened it just a second sooner? It was Christmas Eve, 1999, and I was 18, at the tail end of my senior year of high school. I hadn't seen much of my family that year. My mom, dad, and younger sister had all been super busy with work, and the few times we were together felt strained. To be honest, I wasn't really in the holiday spirit. Something about the holidays always felt forced, especially with the chaos that came with them. I just wanted a break. So, When my parents insisted that I come with them to my aunt's house for Christmas dinner, I declined. I wasn't sick, I wasn't mad. I just didn't feel like going. I told them I'd rather stay home, play some video games, watch the TV specials, and have a quiet night to myself. I'm pretty sure they thought I was being a moody teenager, but I didn't care. It felt like the best decision, even though I had a weird feeling about it. The house was empty when they left around 6 p.m. My sister, who was 12, had been nagging my mom for weeks about how she was going to stay at home and have her own little Christmas party. But my parents didn't budge. She went with them, and I was left in the quiet house. The lights on the Christmas tree flickered in the corner of the living room, and the scent of cinnamon and pine still hung in the air from when we decorated earlier that month. I turned off the TV, grabbed a bag of chips, and went into the living room to settle in for a peaceful night alone. Around 9 p.m., I was feeling good about my decision. There was something strangely calming about being in the house without anyone else around. The wind had picked up outside, and the sound of snowflakes tapping against the windows added to the eeriness. I made a cup of hot chocolate, sat by the tree, and began playing my old PlayStation. The quiet was almost too quiet. Then came the knock at the door. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe it was a neighbor or someone dropping by to check in. But when I glanced at the clock, 9:45 p.m., I wondered why anyone would be visiting so late on Christmas Eve. I grabbed the nearest baseball bat from the closet, just in case, and went to the door. I peered through the peephole and saw a man standing on my porch. He was tall, wearing a dark winter coat, a scarf covering most of his face, and a baseball cap. I couldn't see his eyes. But what caught me off guard was that he didn't knock again. He just stood there, completely still, as though he was waiting for me to open the door. I didn't. I waited a few moments, my heart starting to race. Something felt off. Maybe it was the strange silence. Maybe it was the way he wasn't leaving. But I knew that I wasn't about to open the door to some random person in the middle of the night. Then came the voice. "Hey man," the man said in a low, almost too calm voice. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm stranded. My car broke down a few miles back and I need to use your phone." I didn't answer right away. My mind was racing. This wasn't some friendly neighbor. I didn't recognize the guy. And why didn't he just call for help? Why was he asking to come inside? I stepped back from the door, still clutching the bat in my hand. My pulse was starting to pick up. He must have noticed the hesitation because he spoke again, this time more forcefully. "Come on, dude. Just open up. I'm freezing out here." That's when I knew. Something wasn't right. No one just stands outside a stranger's house at night in the middle of nowhere on Christmas Eve. I backed away from the door and ran into the living room, trying to calm myself down. I could hear him shuffling outside, and the air felt thick with tension. I immediately grabbed my phone to call my parents, but there was no signal. The house was on a bit of a hill, and the reception was terrible, especially on the edges of town. I started pacing, anxiety tightening around my chest. Then, the knocking came again. Louder this time. I froze. Bang! The sound echoed through the quiet house. And then, nothing. Silence. Absolute silence. I crept back to the front door, heart thundering in my chest. The man was gone. I thought about opening the door to see if he had left, but something inside told me to stay back. I knew I had to stay quiet. Suddenly, I heard a noise from the side of the house. I cautiously peered out the window beside the door. The figure was there again, the same man. Only now, he was standing next to the back gate, looking directly at me through the window. I could see his face clearly now, dark eyes, a wide, unsettling grin under the scarf. I stepped back, and my blood went cold. Then, the phone rang. It was my mom. "Hey, are you doing okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. She'd called to check on me, but I was so on edge that I could barely respond. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, trying to sound calm. But as soon as I hung up, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness. I grabbed my flashlight and quietly crept toward the hallway. The wind howled louder now, and the sound of snow scraping against the windows sent chills through my spine. I knew I couldn't just sit there. I heard the back door creak open. The man was inside. I ran to the closet, grabbed a small knife from the kitchen, and hid behind the couch, holding my breath. The house was eerily quiet now, except for the soft padding of footsteps on the carpet. And then, I swear to God, someone called out just above a whisper. "Hello? I know you're in there." I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. Could I make it to the phone? Could I get out of the house? Should I run? I waited in that crouched position, holding the knife, hoping he wouldn't find me. For what seemed like hours, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, just silence. Then, suddenly the front door opened again. I didn't wait. I bolted to the door, unlocked it, and ran outside into the snowy darkness. I didn't stop running until I reached the neighbor's house. When my parents came home later that night, they found the house had been ransacked. The back door had been forced open. But the strangest part? There was no sign of the man. He had just disappeared. I don't know who he was or why he came to my house that night. Maybe he was just a burglar, or maybe he was something worse. But I'll never forget that night. Christmas Eve, 1999, the night I should have gone to Christmas dinner with my family, and I'll always wonder, if I hadn't run, would I have made it out alive? If you've experienced a terrifying event or have a horror story to tell, we at AG Horrors want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us on Reddit, and let's uncover the mysteries hiding in the shadows together. And if you want to support the channel and help us bring even more terrifying content, consider checking out our support options on Patreon or Ko-fi. Your support means the world to us. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories like this one. And now, stay tuned for the next horror episode.